You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What happens when our nervous system runs with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake? Stay tuned for an episode that may feel very familiar. Hi, I'm Petra Brunnbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. There's a profound exhaustion that can seep into our lives that comes from trying to hold yourself together for far too long. If you have ever felt functional on the outside while wired, numb, or overwhelmed on the inside, this episode will feel uncomfortably familiar in the best possible way. Unexpectedly, I get the chance to introduce myself today. I am Petra Brunnbauer, a mind-body professional, founder of the Jōrni Wellbeing platform, host of the globally ranked Jōrni Podcast, which you're listening to, and author of the Functional Freeze Formula. With a master's in psychology and as a doctoral student in mind-body medicine, I am dedicated to advancing holistic and integrative approaches to well-being. I support professionals in understanding and recovering from functional freeze so they can engage with their full human potential. Through my programs, writing, events, and global community initiatives, individuals and organizations can explore integrative healing in ways that are accessible, transformative, and sustainable. And here's my story. Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening in today. We are doing something a little different today, as I recently realized that I have never done a solo episode in the past 300 plus episodes I've recorded for the podcast. And the end of the year felt like the perfect time to share a little bit more about my journey and about functional freeze. A few years ago, I was 39 years old and sitting in a wheelchair holding a box of lidocaine patches and wondering, how did I get here? And the simple answer is stress. What brought me to that point had started decades earlier. I was born in Germany and had what I thought was a relatively typical childhood until everything changed at 13 when my family moved to Canada. That shift was seismic for me. I lost my language, my culture, my friends, and in many ways, I lost my identity. I didn't have the words for it back then, but now I know that was the start of a long, quiet unraveling. As a teenager, I struggled deeply with mental health, body image, and this unshakable sense that something was off inside me. I went to therapy. I tried medications, I threw myself into self-improvement, nutrition, fitness, you name it, and I did it, but nothing brought lasting relief. Even when life looked fine from the outside, I always felt like I was barely holding it together inside. And that feeling followed me into adulthood. I spent years pushing through. I worked in corporate, I got degrees, I functioned, but under that functionality, there was always this undercurrent of anxiety, exhaustion, and disconnection. And honestly, I just thought this was how life as an adult was supposed to feel. Years later, my first corporate burnout came, and instead of slowing down, I took on more. I worked longer hours, filled my calendar, and kept myself too busy to think about what was going on inside me. I thought that was resilience. By the time my second burnout hit in my early 30s, I was living with brain fog, exhaustion, and really strange symptoms like a temporarily paralyzed leg. I still did not stop. I moved to France to start over, but inside, I still felt disconnected, numb, and overwhelmed. And then came a year of profound loss when several people close to me passed away. I would have kept going, but this time was different. It felt different. I began to wonder if this was all life had to offer, because I felt I could not and did not want to keep going. I was tired, and I felt like there was nothing left of me in all of this. And this is when the first thoughts of creating a happy place for people started floating through my head. These were the beginnings of the Jōrni, the virtual wellbeing platform that I eventually created because I didn't want anyone to spend their lives like I had done. Back to the wheelchair. In 2020, all of that stress stored in my mind and body finally caught up with me. I broke my foot, and instead of recovering after 6 weeks, I developed complex regional pain syndrome and ended up in a wheelchair. And even with all my training and all my certifications, I didn't have the answer. But I figured it out. And what I discovered along the way is what I do now. I found a name for everything I had experienced in my life and even wrote a book about it. I know that so many of us are devastated by the effects of chronic stress without knowing it and without knowing that we can recover. And I want to change that. It has become my mission since then, a big reason why I started this podcast and why I created the Jōrni. So much information about how we can advocate for and support our healing is out there, but it's often hard to find and scattered over various places and platforms. So where do we go from here? You may have heard about functional freeze before, but more likely you have never heard about it, but it is the essential foundation of this episode and nearly everything I do today. When I was trying to understand my own symptoms, the classic stress responses of fight, flight, and freeze didn't fit what I was living day to day. I was functioning, working, showing up for others, but inside I felt wired, anxious, exhausted, numb, empty, and just overwhelmed by the smallest things. It felt like I had one foot on the gas and one on the brake at the same time, and this didn't fit the classic, there's a stressor and we fight, or there's a stressor and we flee, and then we settle back down. My experiences didn't mirror that. So I kept researching stress responses and came across a whole bunch of additional models and stress responses. There was so much more out there than just fight and flight. But I still couldn't find a map that described that mix of activation and shutdown while I functioned. And then I found a brief reference to functional freeze in one of Dr. Peter Levine's books. And that gave me a name to start with. I expanded that idea into a full framework that describes what happens when we keep functioning on the outside while our nervous system is locked in survival on the inside. Functional freeze is a survival pattern driven by chronic stress. It explains how you can look functional and keep moving through the day while feeling depleted, disconnected, and unable to reset. Naming it matters because it gives us a way to work with what is actually happening rather than blaming ourselves for not coping better with life. What is actually happening in functional freeze is a very specific nervous system pattern. The nervous system is maintaining outward functioning while staying in survival mode internally. The sympathetic branch remains active enough to support movement, focus, and task completion, and at the same time, the parasympathetic branch limits recovery, emotional access, and physiological reset. That combination creates a state where action is possible, but restoration is not. Now you can imagine this, as I alluded to before, like driving your car with one foot on the gas and one on the brake. Your car is not going to sustain that, and neither is your body. In this state, the nervous system prioritizes continuity over recovery. Energy is directed towards staying operational rather than toward repair, connection, or integration. And over time, that produces a very particular internal experience. I felt like I was wired and tired at the same time, present enough to function, but disconnected from myself, able to keep going, but unable to relax or feel present in my body. Those sensations were the lived experience of my nervous system running two competing survival strategies at the same time. Functional freeze usually develops through ongoing stress that doesn't resolve, and the nervous system doesn't receive a clear signal that threat has ended, so it adapts by staying partially mobilized and partially shut down. Once that adaptation is in place, the nervous system continues to run it automatically. Today, stress does not show up as one clear event that begins and ends. It looks like work that never fully switches off. Messages, emails, deadlines, pressure to respond quickly, pressure to perform consistently, pressure to be available even when you are exhausted. The nervous system stays alert because there's always something waiting. At the same time, there's family life, parenting, caregiving, relationships, emotional responsibility, managing households, holding space for other people's needs while your own are pushed aside. And even when these roles matter deeply, they still require constant regulation from the nervous system. There's also financial pressure, uncertainty about the future, and the background noise of news, information, and social media. Add health concerns, unresolved loss, or ongoing personal stress, and there's very little space where the nervous system actually gets to stand down. When these layers keep stacking, the nervous system adapts. Instead of staying flexible and moving in and out of stress responses, it stays partially activated. Functioning becomes the priority, and recovery moves further into the background. We wake up and the first thing we do is check our phones. There are messages already waiting, emails that came in overnight, a notification we meant to deal with yesterday, and our bodies are jolted awake even before we sit up. The day fills up quickly, work, conversations, decisions, things that need follow-up. We move from one thing to the next because that is what it takes to keep going. There's always another message, another task, another responsibility that needs to be handled. And by the time we might notice how tired we are, we're already mostly through the day. We tell ourselves we'll slow down later, after this call, after this deadline, or after this week, and we keep going because stopping would mean that we would have to admit that something is very wrong. In the evening, when things finally quiet down, we don't just suddenly feel rested. Our minds are still busy. We think about what we didn't get to, what still needs to happen, and what tomorrow will look like. We're exhausted, but often can't sleep because of all that overthinking and anxiety. And the next day, we do it all over again. This is how chronic stress slowly seeps into our lives. It's sneaky, and we often expect a really visible or noticeable traumatic event or something life-changing where we can say, yes, that's where it happened, or that's what's impacting me. But in reality, in today's world, that's simply no longer the case. In my research, I found hints that this mixed state of being wired and tired was, in fact, physiologically possible in the nervous system. Stress doesn't always fit neatly into categories where we move from one experience to another smoothly. More often, it's messy, unpredictable, and we can cycle through different stress responses rapidly, or even be in two of them at the same time like I was. I was essentially in fight and flag, another response I came across, at the same time. And I want to make you aware of this because so many people are in functional freeze without knowing it, without being able to name it, and then it becomes hard to recover because there are no actual answers. That is why in this episode, we are looking at chronic stress through the functional freeze formula framework. It is the map we're using to see where stress is stored, why it has such a huge impact, and how balance and regulation can be restored across our minds, bodies, emotions, and energy systems. What we often miss in conversations about chronic stress is that the nervous system does not experience stress in isolated, compartmentalized boxes. Stress accumulates. It builds across time, across contexts, and across different areas of our lives. Work stress doesn't just stay at work. Relationship stress doesn't stop when we go to work. Financial stress doesn't disappear just because we're trying to relax and enjoy life. The nervous system takes all of it in at the same time. And when that stress is ongoing, the nervous system stops responding as if each stressor is separate. It starts responding to the total overall stress load. Instead of moving from one stress response to another, the nervous system starts blending them. Activation doesn't fully turn off and lower our cortisol levels, but shutdown doesn't fully take over either. We're still functional. The body stays in between, constantly adjusting, constantly compensating. That mixed state can look different from day to day. Sometimes we might feel driven and productive. Sometimes we feel disconnected, unclear, or emotionally numb. Sometimes both happen in the same afternoon. The nervous system is trying to manage competing demands with limited capacity. And chronic stress also changes how the nervous system interprets the world around us. Things that would not have been stressful before can start to feel overwhelming for seemingly no reason. Decisions that used to be simple require more effort and focus. Interruptions are harder to move on from. And even when there's time to rest, the nervous system doesn't recover the way it used to. An adaptation happened over time to the chronic stress load we experience in day-to-day life. The nervous system stopped being flexible and adapted to chronic stress by constantly being partially wired, partially on, if you will. What I have observed is that the nervous system seems to have learned how to hold this mixed state for much longer than it was meant to. A response that was designed to help us get through short periods of intense stress has slowly turned into something that runs in the background of everyday life. Instead of switching on when needed and then standing down again, the nervous system stays partially activated as a default. And that ongoing adaptation keeps us functional, but it does so at a cost to our energy, our health, and our sense of self over time. Now that you know what functional freeze is and how it connects to chronic stress, let's look at where these patterns actually live. We often think of stress as something that is mostly mental and can be handled by reducing stress or changing how we think about it. And that can help in some situations, but it leaves out the most important part. Stress is not just something we experience and then move past. When it is ongoing, it becomes something the body adapts to. The nervous system, brain, and body all adjust their functioning based on what they're repeatedly exposed to. Chronic stress leaves lasting imprints in our biology, like the brain, the nervous system, the fascia, the muscles, the organs, the gut, and even down to our cellular level. At this level, stress can also influence how our genes are expressed, which affects inflammation, immunity, and how the brain functions. And once these stress imprints are in place, they run our stress patterns automatically. These are measurable changes. Chronic stress alters neural pathways in the brain, shifts how the autonomic nervous system responds, affects hormonal signaling through systems like the HPA axis, and changes how the immune system and gut communicate with the brain. Over time, the body starts to anticipate stress rather than respond to it. And the stress imprints change how our bodies and brains function every day. They even physically change the brain, for example. They shape what we notice, like hypervigilance, how we react and how we feel, even when nothing stressful is happening in the moment. When the nervous system has adapted to chronic stress, it begins scanning the environment differently. In functional freeze, that can show up as being on edge, getting overwhelmed by small things, or feeling emotionally numb and disconnected without being able to point to a clear reason or obvious starting point. This is why it's so important to address chronic stress where it's actually stored if we want to create real and lasting change. But once chronic stress has been stored in our biology, it affects a lot more than just our stress responses. It can interfere with the body's ability to heal, digest food effectively, sleep properly, balance hormones, maintain a strong immune system, which is why when you're experiencing chronic stress, you can get sick a lot, and keep our mood balanced. At this point, the nervous system and the endocrine system start affecting everything. When the autonomic nervous system stays in stress physiology for too long, it changes digestion, sleep quality, immune function, and hormone signaling. And this is where we see the HPA axis coming in, with stress hormones like cortisol influencing our bodies. And continuously high cortisol levels can wreak havoc on their own and cause damage to our physiology. Remember here that we were never meant to stay in a stress response permanently. We can also see this in the gut. When the nervous system stays activated, the gut-brain axis is affected. Our digestion can become less efficient, inflammation levels can increase, and the enteric nervous system begins sending distress signals back up to our brain. That loop is one of the reasons stress can feel like it's happening everywhere in the body, not just in the mind. Chronic stress can also have a profound impact on our mental and emotional well-being. When we have experienced chronic stress for long periods of time, anxiety and depression often become part of everyday life. Anxiety can mean constant worry, feeling tense most of the time, or always anticipating that something is about to go wrong, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Depression can look like sadness, lack of motivation, or a sense that life just feels darker and harder than it used to. We might experience emotional disconnection, feeling numb or empty, like we're not fully present in our lives or running on autopilot. Chronic pain can be another expression of stored stress. Ongoing muscle tension, headaches, jaw pain, back pain, or widespread body pain are often present when stress has been carried for a long time. There's also a growing body of research linking chronic stress with autoimmune conditions, where the immune system becomes dysregulated and begins reacting in ways that affect the body itself. Conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia are often discussed in this context as frequently coexisting with long-term stress and nervous system dysregulation. As it was the case for me, pain and exhaustion become part of daily life without modern medicine being able to offer a satisfactory explanation. Stored stress also changes how we interpret and respond to what happens each day. Past experiences and unresolved stress influence whether we see something as safe or as a threat, and that determines how intensely we react to it. At the same time, attention and perception begin to change because the brain is adapting to what the nervous system keeps signaling. When the amygdala becomes more reactive and the prefrontal cortex has less capacity, it becomes harder to stay regulated in real time. The nervous system stays oriented toward threat detection like an alarm system, and that shapes how we interpret tone, urgency, facial expressions, emails, and even silence. Decision-making can become so much harder here. When stress physiology is running in the background, our cognition changes. Working memory can be affected, and we may experience brain fog or forgetfulness. Focus takes more effort than usual, and we might run into challenges with motivation and procrastination. This helps explain why you can step away from stressful situations, take time off work, go on a holiday, and still feel exhausted, overwhelmed, in pain, anxious, disconnected, or dealing with brain fog, because our biology is still responding as if the stress is active. This part tends to be the most confusing. We can be in a different environment doing something that should feel restorative and still feel the stress in our bodies. That happens because the nervous system and the brain are still running the same protective pattern. The scenery changes, but the internal pattern does not automatically switch off. The usual approaches can start to feel disappointing. We can rest, we can take time off, we can do all the right things and still feel like something is not shifting. Stored stress is not only a sensory experience, it is biology, and biology needs a different kind of support to change. So if chronic stress is stored in our biology and keeps driving these stress patterns, the next logical question is, why the things we usually try to manage stress do not solve the problem for good? There are many ways we try to feel better when we are stressed. We might take time off, go on holiday, get more exercise, change our diet, talk to a therapist, do yoga, breathwork, meditation, or make space for self-care, or we sometimes fall into negative coping mechanisms like self-medication or substance use. And these can feel helpful in the moment, but the effects don't last, and some of them cause significant harm over time. And the reason these don't last is that none of these approaches on their own reach the imprints of stress that are stored in the biology. Even if we feel better for a while, those imprints are still active in the background. Most of these approaches respond to stress once it is already there, rather than changing how the nervous system prepares for stress in the first place. And over time, this creates a pattern where stress management becomes something we do on top of an already overloaded nervous system, rather than something that reshapes how our nervous system is operating. Most of the things we try are working around the edges of the problem rather than working with where the stress is actually stored. For example, taking time off can reduce immediate pressure, but it doesn't change how the nervous system has learned to respond to stress. Exercise can discharge energy and improve our mood, but it does not necessarily teach the nervous system how to regulate or build capacity. And therapy can bring insight and understanding, but insight alone does not automatically change physiological stress patterns that have been running for years. Even practices that work directly with the body can fall short if they're applied by themselves. We might do yoga, breathwork, or meditation and feel calmer for a short time, but if the nervous system is still organized around survival underneath, that experience does not last long term. Because the nervous system is still organized around survival, recovery becomes something we chase periodically, rather than it becoming our actual baseline. We try one thing, then another, hoping the next approach will finally make it stick. Those strategies can affect our experiences temporarily, but they don't usually change the pattern that has been running underneath for a long time. As long as that pattern is still active in the body and the nervous system, the same responses tend to resurface once the immediate relief wears off. And this brings us to another important question. If stress is being held in the body and the nervous system, what actually needs to be worked with for that change to last? One of the biggest reasons creating lasting change is so hard is that these stress patterns are stored in the brain, nervous system, and the body, and they run mostly outside of our conscious awareness. Because they're biological programs, we can't just decide to stop them. We can't think or reason our way out of them, and we can't talk ourselves into feeling differently. Once these patterns have been in place for months, years, or decades, they will automatically trigger survival responses, even when nothing threatening is happening in the moment. If we do not address them at the biological level, they will keep influencing how we feel, how we react to what is around us, and how we function day to day. A common response to feeling stuck is to try to change what is happening on the outside. We leave a job, end a relationship, move to a new place, restructure our days. We might even buy a new car or a new outfit or redo our hair or search for the next solution that promises relief. On the surface, these changes can feel decisive and hopeful. Something is finally different. But when the internal work hasn't been done, the same stress patterns travel with us. The nervous system doesn't reset just because circumstances change. Without internal safety and regulation, the body continues responding in familiar ways, even in a new environment. The external details shift, but the internal experience stays the same. That's why we often find ourselves repeating the same patterns in different situations. Different jobs, same exhaustion, different relationships, same self-sabotage, different routines, same sense of overwhelm or anxiety. Lasting change requires internal conditions to shift first. When internal change hasn't happened yet, changing external circumstances often becomes a way to avoid the internal work that actually needs to be done. Up to this point, we've talked about how chronic stress is stored in our biology and why the usual fixes don't reach it. The key here is that our biology is not just a physical body. It is constantly shaped by our mind, our emotions, and our energy. Most stress management approaches focus on one of these areas. They might target the mind with therapy or mindset work, the body with movement or relaxation, or emotions with processing techniques. While each of these can help, if even one area is left unaddressed, our biology stays imprinted with the same patterns, and the nervous system will keep returning to survival mode. So for recovery, all of these layers have to be addressed together. When we change how they work together, we change how our biology functions. That is when the nervous system can stop defaulting to survival mode and start creating new, healthier patterns. Which brings us to the holistic approach, where my work comes in. Instead of focusing on just one layer at a time, we work with mind, body, emotions, and energy together because all four shape our biology and influence how our nervous system responds. Restoring balance across all of them allows the nervous system to regulate. It allows us to release those stored stress imprints and helps our body's natural capacity for healing to come back online. When we take a holistic approach, we're looking at how stress has shaped us across different layers at the same time. In the mind layer, chronic stress influences how we think, plan, and interpret what is happening around us. We often develop thinking patterns focused on staying functional, managing pressure, and keeping everything under control. So we might spend a lot of time anticipating what needs to happen next, or worrying about what could go wrong. And those patterns help us get through stressful times or traumatic events, but when they become constant, they keep stress responses active even when there's no immediate reason for that. Stress is also held physically, as we already said. We might feel it in our tight shoulders, a clenched jaw, as that pit in our stomach, or in a constant sense of aches and pains we've grown used to. Breathing often changes without conscious awareness. Our posture can even change from upright to more slumped, stooped, or shrunk down. Over time, this becomes normal, even though the body is working much harder than it needs to. When we begin working with the body somatically, we are supporting the release of patterns it no longer needs. And emotionally, chronic stress often limits what we're able to feel. Some emotions like anxiety may feel overwhelming and come up quickly, while other emotions like joy or happiness might feel distant or hard to access. We might stay emotionally guarded in order to keep functioning, or feel flooded when stress builds up. Working with emotions means releasing any stuck emotions and rebuilding capacity to feel without becoming overwhelmed or shutting down. As that capacity grows, our emotional responses will actually stop driving stress reactions so intensely. Energy is another layer through which chronic stress shapes our experience. Every function in the body requires energy, and that energy is not only chemical, it is also electrical and electromagnetic. We live inside our own electromagnetic field. We are influenced by the fields of other people, and we are in constant relationship with the Earth's electromagnetic field. This includes the biofield as an information network around and through our bodies. The heart and brain as powerful generators of electromagnetic signals that influence regulation, and the way whole healing systems like traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda describe energy flow as foundational to our health. It also includes fascia, a body-wide communication web that transmits signals. These systems were never meant to be separated from the body or the nervous system. Under chronic stress, energy may no longer circulate evenly. Coherence can be lost, and communication across these energy systems becomes disrupted. So working with the energy layer can support clearing those communication pathways so we can regain coherence, regulation, balance, and, in essence, recovery. Now, these layers are constantly influencing each other. Emotional responses often arise outside of our conscious awareness. Those emotions shape our thoughts, how we interpret situations, and what we expect to happen next. Our thoughts then influence how the body responds, including muscle tension, posture, breathing, and stress physiology. And energy systems influence all of this by affecting how much capacity our body has available, and ongoing emotional and mental stress feeds back into those energy systems all the time. Together, all of these interactions continuously shape our human experience. When these layers stop reinforcing stress and start supporting regulation, the experience of being in our body changes. This is what makes it possible to then live life without being pulled back into survival mode all the time, to feel safe in our own bodies again, and to get back our energy and emotional capacity for connection. Yes, that love for life and that excitement, our spark. Now that we have explored where stress is stored and what it takes to release those imprints, I want you to experience what this feels like in real time. we're going to do a short but powerful practice together. This practice comes from the fluctuating flow in my book and can help when the nervous system is cycling between activation and shutdown. Find a space where you have a little bit of room around you, and we're going to begin standing. We'll do some grounding first. If you can, take off your shoes and socks and do this barefoot. If you have access to grass, sand, or just earth, do this outside. It's quite powerful to actually feel your feet on the earth. If not, stay exactly where you are, inside your room or house. That's completely fine. Grounding for me is about interacting with the Earth's electromagnetic field and with our own biofield. When our feet are on the ground, we're orienting ourselves in the here and now. And we're also beginning an energetic exchange with the abundant energy all around us. So stand with your feet flat on the ground and let your arms rest by your sides. Take a few breaths in your nose and out your mouth. And make sure to breathe into your belly here, not just in your chest. And then bring your attention down to the soles of your feet. Feel where they are in contact with the ground or the earth beneath you. Think of energy moving upward from the earth through the soles of your feet and into your body. You can even give this energy a color if you like. And as that energy moves upward, notice what you feel. You might notice warmth or tingling. Maybe your chest feels more expansive, or you experience a sense of lightness or more space inside your body. Stay with whatever shows up for you here. Keep your attention on the energy rising up through your feet, while allowing that energy to move through your legs and into your body, helping your mind and body find balance in the here and now. Stay here for a few more breaths. When you're ready, stay standing and we're going to add some movement. Start by marching gently on the spot, lifting one knee, then the other. Be mindful of your breath here and let it continue in a rhythm that feels easy and natural for you. Now add your arms so they cross the center of your body. As you lift your right knee, bring your left arm across the middle of your body in front of you and touch your palm to your knee if you can. And then bring your right palm to your left knee. And keep alternating at whatever speed feels comfortable here for you. If you can't touch your palm to your knee, simply keep crossing over, just reaching to whatever point works for you. The important thing is that we're crossing over the midline of the body. And keep breathing as you move. The crossing movement helps activate both hemispheres of the brain and enhances communication between the left and right sides of our bodies. This type of movement helps the brain integrate physical and emotional responses, which can support the nervous system in returning to a more balanced and regulated state. So stay here and march and cross over for just a few more rounds. When you're ready, stop the movement and take a seat. You can sit on a chair with both feet on the floor or on the ground if that feels comfortable. Keep your spine straight if you can. Sit up tall and lengthen the crown of your head toward the ceiling or the sky if you're outside. And we're going to work with the breath here. So bring one hand to your belly and one hand to your chest. And as you breathe in through your nose, let the breath move down into your belly so the lower hand moves first. As you breathe out through your mouth, let the belly soften and empty. And stay with that pattern. In through the nose and count 4 counts here. Then down into the belly and hold for 4 counts there. and then out through the mouth, and make your exhale just a little bit longer with 6 counts. What we're doing here is shifting the breath away from the upper chest and into the diaphragm. And this changes how the nervous system is being stimulated, reducing some of that sympathetic activation and increasing parasympathetic input through the vagus nerve. So keep breathing this way for a few more seconds. In to a count of 4. Hold for a count of 4. And then exhale for a count of 6. In for a count of 4. Hold for a count of 4. And exhale for a count of 6. Next, stay seated. If you're sitting on the floor, extend your legs out in front of you. And if you're on a chair or at a desk, stay seated with both feet on the floor and just move toward the front edge of your chair a little bit. Sit up tall again, letting your spine lengthen. And as you breathe out, hinge forward from your hips and allow your upper body to fold forward. If your legs are extended, you can fold over your legs. And if you're on a chair, let your upper body fold toward your thighs. This might be on your tabletop if you're at a desk, but just bend slightly forward. Rest your hands wherever they naturally land, on your legs, your desk, or hanging down. You don't need to go far. Even a small fold is enough. And once you're there, just let your head and neck soften and allow your back to relax. Stay here and keep breathing. Folding forward gently compresses and releases the abdomen, which massages our internal organs and supports digestion and detoxification, while also offering a regulating input to the nervous system. So this can help create a more felt internal safety and balance. So stay folded for just a few more breaths. And then slowly come back up to a seated position and just pay attention to your neck and back here as you're coming back up. And last, stay seated. We're going to place both hands flat on our thighs, palms down, and come back to your breath and breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just take a moment to notice what is present right now. Sense into any physical sensations in your body. Notice what is happening emotionally. Is anything surfacing for you? Maybe you feel energy activating or slowing down somewhere. If something stands out, stay with it. Notice it. Give it some curiosity. And if nothing stands out, that's perfectly fine as well. This is simply a moment to let your nervous system integrate what we just did. So stay here for a few more breaths. And then rub your palms together and just shake out your hands. And that's it. Thank you for being here today and for taking the time to do this practice with me. And if this episode resonated with you and you want to explore this work more deeply, I have a few resources for you as well. We offer a free audio series called Surviving in Silence. It's an 8-day journey through the functional freeze formula with one email each day linked to an audio experience. And it's a way to explore what functional freeze is, how it shapes our lives, and how we begin to heal it. My book, of course, is called The Functional Freeze Formula, and you can find it on our website at functionalfreezeformula.com, on Amazon and wherever books are sold. And we also host a lot of virtual and in-person events throughout the year. We have monthly masterclasses, integration circles, webinars, and we have an exciting live online event coming in January 2026. So keep an eye on our events page or sign up for our newsletter where we always keep you in the loop. And we will link to all the Jōrni resources in the show notes as well. And I'm really excited to see you in one of our upcoming events or programs. Thanks for tuning in today. Happy holidays, everyone, and be well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of the Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejōrni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.